This is our series of functional tests, and in this test we're going to check the strength of the core and the pelvis and your hip or glute muscles. And this is important. We want to make sure you have symmetry on both sides. So the test is the bridging test, and she's going to bridge up and she's going to do a single leg bridge. So we want to make sure she's equally strong on both sides. So go ahead and lift up. When she lifts up, she's going to straighten out her left leg, and we want to make sure the pelvis is nice and level so the pelvis doesn't drop down to one side. If she's weak, often that'll happen. So you want to also make sure that your hamstrings are not weak and you start cramping, or your low back muscles aren't weak and start cramping, which will mean that the glutes are weak. Good. Go ahead and come back down. Your goal is to work at holding that position for about 60 seconds. And you got to be able to do that on both sides, left and right side. So this is our functional test for squatting, and we're going to do a full squat and with arms overhead. So you're checking to see not only your ability to bend at the hip, the knees, and the ankle, how much flexibility you have, but we're also going to check the flexibility of your spine, your thoracic spine, your upper back, and your shoulder girdle too. Okay, and if you're not able to go to a full squat and maintaining the arms overhead too, you might be stiff either through the hips, knees, or ankles, or for that matter, the shoulder girdle or the upper back. So you can use a stick, and what we want to do is your feet are about shoulder width apart or so, and your toes are pointing relatively straight. And you want to make sure your knees go in line with your toes as you come down into the squat position, making sure your feet stay flat on the ground, the heels don't come up off the ground. And I'm going to hold on to this stick even width apart, so a bit wider than shoulder width apart for this part. And we're going to go overhead, and you're trying to make sure you maintain that overhead position as you come down to that full squat. So now I'm going to squat down and see if you can maintain that position for a couple of seconds. Now you're looking to see whether the arm tends to drift forward and you can't maintain this back position, which will indicate the shoulders are stiff or the upper back is stiff, or for that matter, as you come down and your heels start to come up, you can't maintain your trunk in that alignment and you start to drift forward. So from a side position, that same position would be here, and you're going to do the exact same thing. Come down and see if you can maintain that position. Head stays up. Now if you find that this is happening, you start to round forward or the heels coming up, it means that either the joints or the muscles or some of the other structures are just stiff. So your goal is to be able to do a full squat, and that indicates you have good flexibility throughout that whole chain. So this is our functional test for balance, and also to be able to do a single leg squat, which is essential not just for walking and running, but just any activity. So what we want to do is first being able to see whether you're able to stand in a single leg position. And your goal is to be able to stand in that position without losing your balance or the pelvis dropping, and maintaining alignment for at least 60 seconds. That's the first part of that, being able to do that. The second part is being able to do a squat, a single leg squat. Now you might be able to do just halfway, so then you want to gauge how strong or how far you can go down. So goal is to be able to work at coming down, hold for a sec, and then come back up. Definitely if you're an elite athlete, you definitely want to be able to go full squat, hold for a second, and come back up. Now if you have knee problems, this is also a test done to figure out if you have patellofemoral, patellar tendonitis, or knee-related issues. So this could be an indicative test when you come down and with a single leg squat position that you have kneecap pain or anywhere around the knee, or pain anywhere around the knee. So do the test, and if you need a little bit of assistance for the single leg part and the balance isn't good, hold on to a chair and then do the test. So this is our functional lunge test to figure out the flexibility of the ankle joint. See if you're missing some range of motion in the ankle. If the ankle joint is stiff, or if you have tightness of the calf or Achilles tendon, it's going to limit your ability to go bend your knee past a certain point because the heel will want to come up. So you can use any straight surface. You can even use a wall in front of you. You're going to be about 4 inches away from the surface. So say a fist size or a little bit more than that. So at about 4-inch mark, and you can put a piece of tape there so you have a gauge. All you're doing is you're working at bringing that knee towards that chair or that surface without lifting your heel up. So when I lean forward and I bring my knee towards that, my heel should stay flat on the ground, which tells me I have good amount of ankle flexibility to go over that, the knee to go over that foot. So your things you want to look out for are, one, the heel shouldn't come up as you're going forward. That means the ankle is tight. Or the foot shouldn't drift out, shouldn't turn outwards as you're going in, because that also means the ankle could be stiff. So your goal is to make sure the knee and the shin bone stays in line, your tibia stays in line with your foot as you lean forward, and you check the flexibility of that joint. Okay, so test both sides to see which side is stiffer, and if it's stiffer, then use the flexibility exercise we're going to go over to improve the flexibility of the joint and the muscles. Another functional test that we have, and this is a push-up plus test we're doing. And in this test, we're checking to see the strength of the core muscles, your shoulder girdle, your arms, to make sure you're strong enough. So remember, it's not just the legs, even though we're addressing a lot of knee-related issues, everything in the whole chain has to be strong. So she's going to do a push-up position, and then we're going to do a push-up plus after that. Okay, go for it. So she raises up, and now she's going to push up into my hand. So you do a push-up plus. So she kicks in her abdominal muscle. So you want to maintain that alignment. So the push-up plus position really kicks in a lot of the shoulder girdle muscles too, as well as all her core muscles are kicking in. So the goal is to maintain that position for 1 minute. And you want to make sure you can maintain that without getting too shaky and without losing stability. Okay, good. Go ahead and come back down. And you want to test yourself. You want to see if you're able to do that. And if you're not, you want to focus on working on core stability exercises. So this test, we're going to check for the hip flexibility. This is called a Faber test, a physical therapy test. And it's a good way to figure out if there's some hip tightness, the joint is tight. Also a good test to figure out if there's some sacroiliac joint issues or some other hip problems going on. So you want, and it's a good way to compare left versus the right side. And if the hip is tight, it doesn't open up properly, we know that the joint is stiff. So where you're going to do the test is, we're going to test the left leg. You're going to bring the leg up. You place your heel just above the knee, okay? And you let that knee drop down. Now your goal is to make sure the knee comes flush in line with the other leg. And if it doesn't come down as you push down, often the hip joint is tight. There's some restriction going on. So this is a good example for you to see that the hip is tight. As we bring the leg down, it's a bit stiff through there. So it should be coming down a little bit lower. Okay, doesn't mean she has any ongoing problem, but we definitely know the hip is tight. Okay, so make sure you test both sides to see which side is stiffer or not, and then you can use the exercises we do later to stretch out, open up that hip joint. And that's very important for you runners or athletes to make sure that you have good mobility in that hip. So this is our next functional test, and we're checking for hamstring flexibility. This is really important. If the hamstrings are tight, it's going to impact everything in the chain. You can have knee issues, hip issues, back issues. So we're going to do a simple test to figure out symmetry between the left versus the right side. And what she's going to do is she's going to just lift that leg straight up. So your goal is to work at about 85, 90 degrees. So this is pretty good in terms of her range of motion. So if she was about here, in terms of her flexibility, this is about moderate amount of tightness that's there. And if you're down through here somewhere, this is really stiff. So there's a lot of restriction in those hamstrings. And so you want to make sure you test left and right side to determine which side is stiffer. And if you're not meeting that 85, 90 degrees, to work at the flexibility exercise to improve that flexibility so you can prevent injuries and and perform better at sports or even day-to-day activities. So now go and test out both sides and see how they look. So this is another one of our functional tests, and this is testing to see the flexibility of your thoracic spine or your upper back and your rib cage. So it's not just important to determine the flexibility of the strength of the hip, the knee, or the legs all along that lower chain. You want to make sure you have good mobility throughout that whole chain. So if you're stiff through the upper back, the rib cage, and the spine, it's going to affect your sports performance and also how well you move and how well you walk. So we're going to do this quick test where you can use a broomstick and hold on to that, and you're going to turn towards. She's going to turn towards the left as far as she can go to see how far she can go towards her left. Remember, the stick allows her to gauge left side versus the right side. So when she turns, she'll determine which side is stiffer. and good test to do a quick test and figure out your overall flexibility throughout your rib cage. Okay, make sure you do both sides to see which side is stiffer. This is another one of our functional tests, and this is to check the flexibility of the hip flexors. It's called a Thomas test. It's a physical therapy test, and easy to do. You can do it yourself. You can sit on the edge of the bed. So we're going to be checking the flexibility of the hip flexors on the left side. What she's going to do is she's going to grab on. You're going to grab onto your knee on the right side, so you essentially just roll right back. As you roll back, we want to see if the left leg stays down against the mat, and as well as the left knee stays bent. So if you find that the whole thigh is lifting up off of the bed or the mat or wherever you're laying down on, it means that the hip flexors, your iliopsoas, these guys are tight through here. Okay, and if you find that the knee is extended or straightened out a bit, your rectus femoris and some of these other muscles through here are tight too. So we want to make sure that this is where you're ending up. So this tells you you have good flexibility of these structures through here. And you want to always compare left versus right side to make sure that one side isn't stiffer than the other side. So this is mainly checking, mainly checking the flexibility of the hip flexors. Okay, so make sure you test both sides out and see which side is stiffer. So this is our test to check the flexibility of the knee joint again, and this is to see if you have adequate extension or you can straighten out your knee completely. So if you're missing range of motion in the knee, you can straighten out completely, whether because of your tibiofemoral, the main joint, or because of the kneecap being stiff. It's going to affect the whole chain, not only causing problems, but it'll really impair your sports performance. So we want to make sure she has full range of motion, full extension in that joint. So all you're going to do is you can sit down on the floor. You can lay down and do this test too. She's going to lift that. You're trying to lift your foot up off the ground while keeping your knee straight and keeping the leg on the mat. Okay, so you're pushing your kneecap straight down when you do that test. So she clears the mat, so she's got good extension, good range of motion. So go ahead and bring it down. So if she's not able to do that, she tries to lift up, and if you can't clear the mat, it just shows that that knee joint often is very stiff. So you want to make sure you test both sides, and you have at least about a finger width you can raise up over off the mat. Okay? So do both sides and check to make sure that you have adequate flexibility in that joint. And if you don't, you want to work at improving the flexibility by doing the stretching.